everyone, welcome to NonTrivial. I'm your host, Sean McClure. We all depend on our environment to survive. We need food, water, friends, family, coworkers. We participate in the economy, pay for entertainment, post on social media, but all these things bear the seeds of our destruction. We need things to grow, but past a point, these same things can destroy us. The real challenge in life is finding the right dosage for the things we depend on. Analytical approaches tend to fail when it comes to finding the right dosage, so I offer an alternative based on complexity and signals. Let's get started. We are not self-sufficient beings, right? We totally depend on our environment, right? So as individuals, we go through life, we have to obviously ingest food and water in order to survive. We have to interact with our environment. We have to interact with people. We have to collaborate. We have to, mix and match ideas and converse. And this is very much the story of survival of humanity. So at the individual level, we have to, we have these deep, deep dependencies on our environment. I've talked about some of those kind of hidden dependencies before. Some of them are not hidden. Some of them are. At the organizational level, organizations depend on the cooperation and competition with other organizations, right? So they very much depend on being immersed into the market and partaking in that market, and being involved, from a revenue and profit standpoint, from, again, cooperating and competing and getting ideas and using those ideas and hiring employees as they come and go and all this kind of stuff. So there's this kind of flux of input and output within when an organization sits within the market and competes effectively. And then at the nation level, right? Nations have to trade with other nations. They might have to protect their borders and therefore be, defend their borders. Maybe they have to go to war with other nations. Maybe they're trying to kind of take over other parts of the world, whatever it is. The individual, the organization, and the nation all depend, so kind of at all scales, if you will, on inputs from the environment, right? We have to take things in, and we have to use those resources effectively if we're going to survive, right? And there's many, many different ways to think about this. You can think about it physically, think about it informationally, all the different kind of facets and manifestations of the way this plays out. But it's very much true that, people, individuals or organizations or nations, we all at all levels have this dependency with our environment. We have to take inputs, right? We have to take in resources in order to survive. So part of that is... This is not necessarily a good or a bad thing. What I mean by that is if you take in, let's say as an individual, you have to obviously take in food and water, so you can decide, make decisions around that as to what type of food you're going to take in and how much of it, right? So if we I just start with something basic like water, right? Water is good. So is it, kind of a black and white, it's definitely a good thing? Well, no, you can drown, right? You can have too much water. Even drinking, you could drink too much water and essentially drown or, overwork the kidneys or something like that. You could do it in a potentially dangerous way. The food that we eat, right? We need food to survive, but you could eat too much food, you could overwork the body, you could stress the body, you could lead to, bad health, whether that's through weight gain or maybe you're taking in too much sugar, maybe you're taking in too much salt or MSG or whatever it is, carbs. Food is a good thing, right, to a certain point, and then past a certain point, it becomes a bad thing. And we can go up to the organizational level, right? We want, let's say, eccentric individuals because they might be particularly creative, but they can also be toxic if they're too eccentric, right? If their eccentricities start to interfere with a regular flow of business, with a regular flow and use of ideas, and that's going to be problematic. And nations, there's all kinds of great examples of this, how nations need to use, a number of things economically, with the citizens within the country, whatever it is, in order to progress, in order to grow as a nation, maybe to take over certain areas, to increase the quality of life of their citizens, but too much of that can lead to a bad thing. So in all these cases, it's not necessarily just a good or a bad thing, right? When we are in our environment and we're taking in resources, we have that dependency, we need to do it, but it only works up to a point, and then it can be kind of catastrophic, right? There's always the seeds of destruction within the things that we take in life. And again, this could be physically or informationally, right? This could be, for an individual, this could be you're in a relationship, And there's certain compromises that you have to make. But if you make too much compromises and you give too much of yourself, or you expect the other person to change beyond their true self, then that's going to be problematic. And so whatever scale you're looking at, there's always the seeds of destruction within anything that we take in. We have to take in. We have that dependency, but there's always those seeds of destruction, right? A pretty cool book by Ray Dalio, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. He talks about this at kind of the nation level, where he's looking at, basically this kind of repeating cycle that happens between nations. He looks at, essentially the main empires that have existed, basically starting with the Dutch and then going into the UK, currently the US, and then probably China next, although it's hard to say for sure. And he's looking at these repeatable patterns that occur when they're on the rise, and then when they're at the top, and then when they're on the decline. And you see, economic factors, right? Political factors. You see things like wealth gaps. You see the role of capitalism and democracy. Obviously, military strength, technology, the use of information, intellectual property, and all this kind of stuff. And none of these things are necessarily good or bad. You see the same thing, right? In all the things that you do as a nation, in order to climb up, you're going to have the seeds of destruction in those same things, which I think is really interesting, right? And that's really the essence of this kind of pattern of seeds of destruction, is that it's the same things, that what is good for you is also bad for you, right? What is good for you is also bad for you, right? You've got, steps that nations will take with their currency, for example, right? You got kind of, Ray Dalio talks about essentially the three types of money you can have. You kind of have that hard currency or that hard money like gold or silver. And then you've got the paper currency, which is still backed by something like gold. And then you got fiat currency, which basically completely disconnects itself from the gold or from the silver, right? It's completely disconnected. And at that point, you can start printing money, so you can stimulate the economy. You can get to the point where your nation, essentially establishes the world reserve currency, which gives you a lot of benefits in terms of being able to borrow from other countries, because people want to work within that currency, and so they'll lend to you in that currency. That allows them to save and participate in an economy in that currency. And so it's a nice example of what you're doing with the currency as you detach yourself from the physicality. Like gold can be a good thing. It can drive a lot of revenue, if you will, into the nation. It can bring a lot of money. It can raise the quality of life of your citizens. You can do a lot of things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. But that exact same move also creates these massive obligations. You end up with a large amount of debt. Just think of the United States owing a lot of debt to China. And are they or are they not going to pay that back? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. What most nations do, as Ray Dalio says, is instead of, kind of dealing with those debt obligations, they just end up printing more money. And in the short term, that can be a good thing. Maybe it stimulates the economy. Maybe it continues to keep the empire on top. But that creates that kind of hollows out the nation, because it devalues the currency, and it causes things like inflation and all that stuff. So, and there's all kinds of other examples in the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio, which is pretty cool. Just, military, what you have to do from a military standpoint, what you have to do with new technologies, what you have to do with information. But over time, those same things that you're doing to grow end up causing these wealth gaps, these value gaps, these kind of political gaps. And, as Ray is explaining in his book, you'll be at the very top, and these things will start to be going on. They're kind of these hallmarks that the decline is about to happen. And all of a sudden, you get kind of extreme polarization politically. You get populists that start to rise up in the political scene. That no one seems to agree on what where to point the moral compass or what morality is, and the institutions kind of start to break down. People are not trusting institutions, and all those kinds of things you hear about when. You might, if you look at the United States right now, you could say it has a lot of the hallmarks of decline. Of course, that's debatable, but if you look, especially comparing United States and China, you can kind of see United States has a lot of those markers that Ray Dalio talks about in terms of a nation declining, right? It rose up. It's got this great story of rising to power, and then it's been at the top, and now it's got the hallmarks of decline. But it's the same things that made it rise that made it decline. And that's true if you look at the Dutch, and if you look at the UK, if you look at the United States, and you look at China right now, they're definitely on the rise. Maybe, within the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, maybe they will be at the top. Maybe they'll have a couple hundred years of being the leading empire, but there's a good chance that they will also decline, because again, this is a repeatable structure, as Ray Dalio talks about in his book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. So go check out that book. But this podcast is not about any particular book. What it's about is just the fact that the same things that save you are the same things that kill you, right? The same things that you bring into your life. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning, we have this dependency to interact with our environment, we must take in resources. We must take in inputs. We see this at the individual level. We see this at the organizational level. We see this as nations grow and prosper. They need to work with the environment, work with other nations, work with other people, bring in. But those exact same things that you're doing also bear the seeds of the destruction, because they can end up creating, whether it's big debt obligations, whether it's toxic individuals within an organization, whatever it is. And so what all this essentially leads to, what I think, is a conversation about dosage, right? In life, what we're really trying to do is decide what dosage to strike for the things that we need in order to grow, right? And so this, again, going to all scales at the individual level, you think about diet, right? You need some protein, you need some carbs, you need some salt, okay, but how much? We want to be able to partake in life. We want to be able to be social. So we want to go to, restaurants, but restaurants is never really, the food is never as healthy as something you're doing on your own. So how much of that should we have? We want to be entertained. We want to spend money on entertainment, but how much is good? How much is too much? How much television is too much, right? Think about social media, probably a perfect example. Social media opens up doors. It could do it from an employment perspective. It allows you to promote what you do. But how much is too much? How much do you start to distort your view of reality by being a part of social media? So again, it's not that we shouldn't be dualistic about things, right? It's not that social media is all bad. It's that social media up to a point can be really, really good. It might help your career. It might even help your own, physical health, because you're getting exposed to people, maybe your spiritual health, whoever you're following, whatever conversations you're having, you can be exposed to a lot of great stuff through social media. You can connect with other individuals that you would otherwise would not connect with. And that can be a very positive thing in your life. But then there's that threshold that you pass, and all of a sudden it can be toxic. Maybe you're getting harassed online. Maybe you're interacting with more people than you wanted to. Maybe you grew your Twitter account to 20,000 followers, and up to that point it was great. And then everything after that, you had to keep blocking people, and it just became a mess. And then it wasn't even enjoyable, and you weren't getting the benefit anymore. So we see this with diet, right? We see this with, social media, MSG. How much MSG should I be exposed to? You can say, well, I'm just going to cut it out, but I want to go out and eat. And maybe I'm going to a lot of restaurants that use MSG. And so how often should I do that? I want to be with family and friends, and I want to partake, but I don't want to do that all the time. There's a dosage that you have to strike, right? Organizations, again, we want some, certain individuals to be eccentric. We want that creativity. We want to be able to take risk. You can't do an organization with zero risk. You wouldn't move. You wouldn't compete. You would die immediately. But obviously, there is such thing as too much risk. Where do you strike that dosage? And nations, what do they do with their currency? How much do they trade? How much, other kind of land or area might they try to take over, or at least negotiate with, in order to access resources? How much is too much? Is there a way to strike that dosage? Because everything we do from an input perspective, all the resources that we take in physically and informationally, are going to bear the seeds of our destruction. Okay? Doesn't matter what it is. Everything from water and food to money, right? To information of all kinds, social media, to, the networking that we do with people. There's always too much of a thing. And it's in one sense that sounds obvious, but I think we always kind of get caught in that situation, or quite frequently we can get caught in that situation if we don't have good control over dosage. That situation being, we see something is good, and so we just want more of it. We assume that more is better. More money, more connections, more people, more friends, right? More food, more water, more going out, more drink, whatever it is. And it's easy to get caught in that. Or we go the other way. And we kind of take that absolutist approach, and we say, well, you know what, alcohol is bad, so I'm just going to completely remove it from my life. Someone said too much salt was bad, so I'm just going to literally try to completely eliminate that altogether. Maybe eliminate all the MSG. And we might think we're being kind of smart by taking that absolutist approach, but there's always a cost to doing that. And I'll talk a little bit about later, there might actually be quite a bit of damage, even from a health perspective, in doing that. Because what makes the poison is the dosage. If you've heard that phrase before, the dosage makes the poison, right? In fact, we talked about Paracelsus on a previous episode, and he was one of the people that alluded to that, right? Dosage makes the poison. Nothing is just definitively good or bad, right? It always comes down to dosage. It doesn't matter how extreme it is. I'll use examples later and talk about cyanide and talk about arsenic. Well, those are definitely bad. No, they're not definitely bad. There's a dosage. Water is definitely good. The cleanest, purest water with all the minerals that you need is definitely good. No, it's not. It can kill you, okay? So it doesn't matter what it is. There is always a dosage. And so that's interesting, but also challenging. As we go through life, we depend on our environment. We have to take in resources. We have to just constantly be immersed within our environment in order to survive. But the biggest challenge in terms of the set of decisions that we have to make in life come down to what the dosage is. And that's what we have to get good at. S-shaped curve, what the dosage is. So we can try to pick apart this, from a mechanism standpoint, like how do you find the dosage, right? And so you can go into, toxicology, for example, is a huge area that tries to obviously figure out what the dosage of a poison is, right? Again, dosage makes the poison. So really, it's not just about, classifying what is and isn't a poison. That's not really useful. It's more about what level of S-shaped curve is acceptable, right? And so you get these dose response curves that they'll make where you're basically plotting, the reaction of an organism to the amount or the dosage, of a chemical that they are exposed to, right? So you typically get this kind of where, the organism won't necessarily have much response, and all of a sudden it spikes up really drastically, and then it kind of plateaus off at the top. And so you can try to come up with, as toxicologists often do, these dose response curves and try to figure out, through that maybe where the dosage is, what is acceptable. But this is massively challenging. And the reason is you'll get, it's not just get kind of these U-shaped curves. You'll have to get into all these different models. Maybe the linear model isn't good. You have to try to account for complexities because the organism, like let's say the individual that's getting exposed, it can depend on the mass of the individual, right? Like how heavy they are, whether they're male, they're female, maybe how much muscle, how much fat they have, how tall they are, something about their biochemistry, things that we don't even know. In other words, substances can affect different people in many different ways, right? And this isn't just for, potentially toxic compounds. This is anything, the water, the food, the MSG, the salt, the eccentricities of people, right, that we bring into our organization, the amount of risk that we take in an organization, the amount of economic input or revenue that we expect each year as a nation, the amount of trade that we do as a nation, what we do with our currency, whether we go full-blown, fiat currency detached from the physicality, and on and on and on, the military strength, all this kind of stuff. There is no way to really land on an explicit dosage, in a real analytical sense. Just take a look at the person that's in there and try to take in all the factors. And again, toxicologists do this, but it's not a resolved issue. It's very, very challenging. It's a complex issue. And so you can try to do this more, let's say less analytically, if you will, and try to approach it more from an approach that takes into account complexity, right? Which is obviously something I recommend here on NonTrivial all the time, right? These analytical approaches where you try to kind of nitpick and deduce, a specific dosage for something should not be expected to work in non-trivial or real-world situations. And so we can try to take something like maybe catastrophe theory. So if you think about, I talked a little bit about this kind of thing in the snowball effect, the free speech episode, right? But basically, if you think about an avalanche, you've got the buildup of pressure over time, right? Incrementally, it builds and builds and builds, and all of a sudden it gives way. And that's kind of like what's happening if you think about that dose response curve where you got this little bit of increment, and then all of a sudden it takes off and then it plateaus at the top. So there seems to be this moment where there's a catastrophe, right? So if we think about how much salt or how much MSG or how much carbs or how much protein or how much eccentric people to bring into our organization or how much trade we should have as a nation or whatever it is you're looking at, whatever the thing that you need to bring in, but which could also be your poison, is there a way to understand kind of the threshold model or the catastrophe model of where something all of a sudden collapses? Where all of a sudden, like an avalanche, the avalanche would occur, okay? But again, this is a true property of how systems work, the fact that you have these, catastrophic systems all of a sudden take off, or these kind of bifurcations where things go a certain way and then all of a sudden something goes off into two different directions, or these phase transitions, however you want to do it. These are all true things that happen in nature, but using it to predict what the dosage should be is by no means straightforward. Not really any more straightforward than you would have with a more kind of nitpicky, analytical, low-level, kind of linear approach to the process, right? So we've got the toxicologists kind of doing their things with the dose response curves. They have to do this from a political perspective, right? Because or a policy perspective rather, because they have to put policies in place like the LD50s, these ratings that you put on compounds. Here's how much you were supposed to be exposed to. It's very, very challenging. It really depends on the individual, and you're kind of just doing this to do this. In other words, like if we know this thing can kill us, let's just keep the dosage really, really small. It's not necessarily a proper dosage for the individual. If you're going to be working with a cyano compound in a chemistry lab, meaning it has, cyanide in it or the ability to be produced to produce cyanide, let's just keep this very, very low and let's have good ventilation, as opposed to being, we know the exact dosage this is going to kill you. They don't know the exact dosage. There's not information. And then you've got kind of the failure of catastrophic models from a predictive standpoint. You can go look up catastrophe models on Wikipedia, read all about their various manifestations. Very much true from a scientific perspective. Like catastrophes do happening, right? Avalanches do happening. There are lots of things where you build up over time and all of a sudden there's this inflection point and it takes off. But it doesn't mean you're going to be able to predict when that inflection point takes place, right? You can think about this in terms of fat tail distributions or all this kind of other jargony stuff. If you get into probability and statistics, we know that they exist, but that doesn't mean you know when they're going to happen. And in fact, it's more important to know that it does exist than to know when it's going to happen. Because the when isn't really going to be available information anyways, but knowledge of the fact that things can take off and explode on you can be used in decision-making in life. And I kind of get to that a little bit more in a bit. But the point is, let's go back to kind of the story here. At the beginning, I said, we must partake in environments all the time. We have to input. We depend on those inputs. So you can't get away from that. We're not self-sufficient. We have to be immersed in our environments and take things in all the time. And then I said, but the challenge here, the constant challenge that we're dealing with is that everything that we bring in has a bad side to it, right? It has a good side at the beginning, and then it bears the seeds of its own destruction, right? It's the exact same thing. Nothing has to even change. It's just water, salt, chemistry, fat, protein, people, personalities, compromise, risk, money, revenue, profit, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's not good or bad. It's good up to a point, and then it becomes bad. And then I said, so the big kind of realization of all of this is that it all comes down to dosage in life. We have to try to figure out what the dosage is. And then I said, let's try to kind of pick that apart from a mechanistic standpoint, mechanistically, as I always do on NonTrivial, right? And I said, well, we can kind of look at what the toxicologists are doing. And these are an example, among others, of who are trying to come up with these dose response curves. And we could take a look at an organism or an individual, and we could try to see how they react to a given exposure. You can imagine a bunch of mice studies going on, exposing them to DDT or cyanide or arsenic or whatever it is, mercury, and kind of looking at when they die, right? And trying to figure out, okay, well, they were this body weight and they were this age and they were this, sex, whatever it is. And here's when they died. And so we can kind of try to guess at a threshold, but it's never that simple. It's really hard to kind of pinpoint something analytically. And then you can take a look at things, scientific models that deal with things like avalanches, like catastrophe theories. They look at when all of a sudden things take off. Right? It goes a really long time where it's peaceful and there's a buildup of pressure, and all of a sudden it gives way, and there's all kinds of mathematics around that. Although it gives you an understanding that these things do exist in nature and you can understand a lot of the properties of those catastrophes, it doesn't give you any real predictive ability, or it's really hard to put much prediction around it. And there's this kind of whole story of catastrophe theory kind of having a failure to offer much in the way of predicting when catastrophes are going to occur, right? You think about avalanches happening themselves. It's not that people are predicting when avalanches are going to occur. They just know that what they do is they know that they happen. They know how they happen. And so they go blast the mountains on a regular basis in order to make sure that there's no major buildup. Okay. Analogous to that would be something like, maybe with COVID. Okay, a new virus hits. We don't know much about it. So we know this thing can take off drastically. It's got this exponential takeoff behavior to it. We know that scientifically, mathematically. We understand that property, but that doesn't mean you're going to be able to predict what happens. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to predict when it's going to take off or when it's going to be a problem. And so the right kind of decision there is just, at least initially, start to shut a lot of things down. Let's try to get control over it and then go from that point on. Now, obviously, the COVID situation is a lot more complex than that. But the point is you can make decisions just from the knowledge that these things can take off in a really bad way. So you can do this with avalanches. You can blast on a regular basis. You can do this with viruses where at least initially you shut down and try to get control and then deal it from that point on. You can do it with, forest fires. You could try to maybe allow forest fires to burn themselves on a regular basis so that you don't get this buildup of material where all of a sudden it explodes, right? In other words, don't keep putting out all the fires. Don't keep putting out all the forest fires. Then you got this big matchstick powder keg scenario where you've got all this forest that wasn't allowed to burn, and then all of a sudden a really bad one happens and it explodes. So we can appreciate the catastrophes. We can appreciate that things all of a sudden explode off, but it doesn't necessarily tell you what the dosage is, right? And so it's not going to help you from a dosage perspective, right? We know that too much carbs is going to be problematic, but how much carbs is right? And if I try to eliminate carbs altogether, is that the answer? Probably not, which I'll talk about in a bit. Same thing with salt and same thing with any of the things that we talked about at the individual level, at the organizational level, or at the nation level, right? The countries. You do need these things. You need input. You need to take risk. You can't just shut the world down altogether. You can't just shut yourself down altogether. You have to partake in these things. It really comes down to dosage. Okay, knowing that catastrophes and fat-tailed things exist can definitely help with decision making. But if you think you're going to take an absolutist approach on everything, I think that's definitely the wrong way to do it. So let's get into that a little bit, because why wouldn't you just take an absolutist approach on whatever it is, right? I heard salt can be bad, right? So I'm just going to literally try to eliminate salt altogether. Now you might say, well, isn't that dumb? I mean, obviously we need some level of electrolytes and we need salt, but maybe the decision to take the absolutist approach is still best, because no matter how much I try to eliminate salt, I know I'll probably still be getting too much, let's say, or I know I'll still be getting a certain amount. So maybe the absolutist approach is still good. Maybe if I just make the decision to completely eliminate MSG, then I know I'm probably still getting a little bit of MSG, but then I know that it's low, right? Why can't we just take that absolutist approach, try to eliminate all the things that might just be bad at all, right? This is called hormesis. DDT, why don't we just absolutely eliminate it, knowing that, via entropy, there's still going to be some disorder there. There's still going to be some that creeps in. And that way we keep all our dosages really low. Well, this is still kind of problematic because there's a big cost to eliminating things from your life. And there's also a property that things are not necessarily bad. Okay, you could say, well, I'm going to literally try to eliminate, arsenic from my life. 100%. But that's not necessarily a good thing to do, because arsenic could play a bioactive role at very low concentrations that are useful. And we don't really know where that concentration is. If something is hermetic, it means a little bit of that thing that is bad can actually do a lot of good things for you. And this occurs a lot in nature. You could look at a lot of substances, and it could be every substance. Again, it's not a poison necessarily. The dosage makes the point. But it's not just that you want to eliminate things that could be bad for you. It could be really good for you in the low dosage. So I don't think the absolutist approach necessarily gets you there, even though you could take the absolutist approach and maybe you're only exposed to a little amount, but we don't know what the amount is supposed to be. So you don't know if you're really getting that dosage in a good fashion, right? And so the question is, what do we do? How do we go through life? Got these dependencies. Everything seems to bear the seeds of its own destruction. It all comes down to dosage in the end. I don't think the absolutist approach is going to get you there, because you do need to strike a dosage somehow. But there's no way to analytically know what the dosage is supposed to be. Dosage response studies isn't going to give you that. Understanding the properties of catastrophes, avalanche, where all of a sudden things take off in a kind of a catastrophic fashion. Super useful from a decision-making standpoint in a lot of situations. Avalanches, forest fires, viruses and things like that. There are certain things you can do, but at the end of the day, you still have to try to figure out what the dosage is. In fact, going back to the COVID example, that's probably a good example. I think up front, you can take a very kind of precautionary principle approach and say, look, we're just going to shut things down right now, right at the beginning, right? Because we know how these things could take off. But you're not going to do that for 10 years. You probably shouldn't do that for 5 years. You are still going to have to find a dosage somewhere. You can't just wait around forever, right? We need to partake in life. You can try to eliminate carbs 100% because you think carbs are bad for you. Maybe you're right. Probably a little bit is actually good for you. Maybe the little bit is really, really good for you. And then past a point, maybe it's really, really bad for you. There's probably a dosage you need. And even if that weren't the case, by eliminating carbs altogether, you couldn't go to a lot of restaurants. You'd have to be really picky with the food that you're eating. There might be a social cost to doing that. MSG, there would be quite a big social cost if I was like, no, I absolutely cannot eat any MSG whatsoever. I have to completely eliminate it. There's going to be a cost to that. And there could be a physical cost to that too, because as per hormesis, maybe a little bit of MSG is actually okay. We just really don't want to pass that threshold, okay? So understanding that things can be bad for you is important. Understanding that things can all of a sudden take off and be bad for you is really important, because that can help with decision making. But at the end of the day, we still have to figure out a dosage. So how can we do that? Well, let's take a look at nature. If we think about nature itself, right? I mean, obviously humans are nature, but think of any organism, right? Think about what goes on in a cell. You can imagine there's mitochondria in a cell, these kind of little organelles that are within the cell, whatever level you want to look at, doesn't matter. You can look at the whole earth, you can look at an individual cell. Let's just use a cell, and you got these organelles within there. You can imagine that there are dosage requirements for all of these things, right? They are interacting in an environment, right? The mitochondria is within a cell, and it has to be in communication with the body of fluids that are within that cell and the other organelles, and it's partaking like anything else, right? Analogous to an individual, an organization being in a market, an individual being in a company, whatever it is, right? So how is it coming up with those dosages? I mean, obviously it's kind of doing this in a mindless fashion, right? It's not doing a bunch of analysis and trying to figure out the right amount. Well, I think it really comes down to signals, right? I think that at every level, whether it's the mitochondria, whether it's the cell, whether it's the organism that is composed of cells, whether it is the group that is composed of a bunch of organisms like an ant colony, a termite colony, or a herd of buffalo, whatever it is, And on, doesn't matter what scale you're talking about, there are signals that exist at all levels that get paid attention to. And those signals can be indicative of whether or not a dosage is being met. So we have to kind of reframe how we're thinking about understanding dosage. Instead of trying to think about where it is exactly, instead of trying to understand, well, this person's body weight and this person's height and this person's gender or sex and this person's yada, yada, I'm going to add all that up. I'm going to tally it all together. And then I'll have enough information to know what the dosage of something is supposed to be. I'm saying that's impossible. I'm saying that the causal opacity that I talk about a lot doesn't give us access to that kind of information, but there are high-level signals that we can pay attention to. And those signals can be indicative of whether or not we're on the right track. So let's go back to, let's say, the individual, okay? And then I'll kind of bring it back to how nature's doing it. But if I am trying to understand how much carbs to consume, there is a very good signal that can help me with that. And you can do this yourself. And a lot of people might not realize because they're doing all these other things and maybe they're not paying attention to carbs. They don't think there's a signal there, but there is. Too much carbs is definitely going to have a physical manifestation. You will notice it. You'll really notice it if you try to cut carbs. You will see a lot of your fat disappear. It just is what it is. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing to do, but carbs do definitely play a major role here. And you can pay attention to the signals in your body, how you feel, how you look, how much energy you have, and that can help dictate what's going on. Now, I'm not saying this is going to be obvious right away, but if you start to play with the amount of carbs, the amount of salt, the amount of sugar in your life, there are a lot of signals there to how you're feeling. And some people might think, oh, that's kind of hand-wavy, that's kind of wishy-washy, but you're only thinking that because you kind of got this, what I would consider an old-school analytical approach to trying to tally everything up. That works for simple systems, that does not work for complex systems. In complex systems, we have to pay attention only to the high-level signals. Paying attention to the high-level signals is a much more scientifically rigorous way to go about understanding complexity, okay? Talk about this all the time on NonTrivial. So signals can be indicative of whether or not you are getting the right dosage. You know, if you do too much salt, you're going to feel dehydrated. If you do too much MSG, you could say, oh, we don't really know if this is bad for you. Maybe it's bad for you over the long run. No, I think you do have signals there. I think there is there's a pastiness in your mouth that comes from eating too much MSG. There's a dehydration that comes from too much salt. There's a discomfort that happens in the stomach when you have too much coffee. It's not like you're just ingesting things and you have no idea that this is necessarily bad for you. Even things like radiation that you can't even see. There are signs, there are signals that are worth paying attention to. There's even a paradox that a low amount, as per Hermesis, of radiation can be good for you. A certain amount of radiation, it's not that it's all bad, right? What is the dosage? There are signals that you can pay attention to, right? How much coffee, how much salt, how much MSG, how much carbs, how much protein, how much exercise. Okay, exercise, is it good or bad? Well, it's both. It has the seeds of its own destruction. You can definitely exercise too much. Too much oxidative stress is going to be a problem in your life. You can definitely work out too much. You can work out incorrectly. And you can try to analyze it. You can try to go take advice. How should I work out? How should I lift the weights? How should I supinate the dumbbell? You know, what exercise should I do? What equipment should I use? Just go to the gym, start lifting, and pay attention to your body. It's not a hand-wavy, kind of non-rigorous way to go. It's a very rigorous scientifically way to do it because that's how complexity works, is you pay attention to the high-level signal. And if you do that, when you feel good, when you recover well, when your stomach doesn't feel good, when you feel dehydrated, there's all kinds of signals that your body provides. And it's not more scientific to go and try to analyze every little piece, because now you're getting into fairy tale land. Now you're getting into this you're trying to piece together this causal story of how you think things come together to produce the output, and you don't have access to the story. Statistics is not going to save you from that. Statistics and even mathematics can be quite problematic because it can make you think you have access to things that you don't. It can appear very rigorous because you can piece together this story. But if you're being intellectually honest, you really don't have access to all those analytically available pieces that you can piece together to know what the dosage is supposed to be. So I think paying attention to signals is a much better way to go about life. And you'll see that a lot of things that people talk about in terms of what has worked for them, they've tried many things and then they'll land on something. And then it is kind of, a little more obvious in hindsight. Now you got to be careful because things are always, hindsight's always 20/20. But if you think about what people put up with on a regular basis in terms of discomfort, in terms of not being that healthy, not feeling that good, you can strike a lot of good dosages just by paying attention to a lot of signals. Now, I'm not saying it's the perfect solution, right? I'm not saying go ahead and jump into a bath of arsenic and wait till you start feeling bad. But again, let's not be stupid. We know we have a lot of information available that arsenic, the dosage is probably very, very low and you don't want to mess with that. So you wouldn't start exposing yourself to a ton of radiation, a ton of arsenic, a ton of DDT and then seeing if you feel sick, you would already start really low. But you would pay attention to signals. You would pay attention to how things are going. And it's not just, we're talking about physical health and stuff like that. Think about an organization, how much risk to take on, right? You're obviously not going to go jump into a ton of risk right away. That would be stupid. You're also not going to eliminate all risk altogether and barely have any. Well, actually, organizations probably do this too much, but that's also stupid. You're not going to be able to compete. So there's a dosage there. And trying to tally up all the information to try to figure out where that dosage is going to be problematic. I don't think that's the way to do it. But there are signals. You can start relatively low, but at least bring in a decent amount of risk and start partaking and then start assessing it on a regular basis. There's no magic formula, but pay attention to the signals. This is what works. This is what doesn't. Continually be able to pivot and adjust your approach, right? And now what about nations? Now, the thing about nations is, it's pretty ridiculous to say to a country, look, don't grow too much, right? Just grow a little bit and see how it goes and pay attention to the signals. We know that they're going to be, they're always going to want to increase the quality of life with individuals. They're going to want to take over more land. They're going to want to trade more. They're going to eventually go fiat currency. They're going to detach from the physicality. They're going to borrow. They're going to print money. There's no reason to believe this isn't going to happen, right? Individuals and organizations and nations, especially, are just primed to continue to build, to continue to create, and to continue to grow. So it's not like we have these built-in limitations, but we do know how to pay attention to signals. Now you could say, well, how do you get a nation to pay attention to signal? Well, remember in the democracy episode when I was talking about these kind of watchdog organizations, right? Democracy by itself already has some things built in to pay attention to signals, right? We switch leaders on a regular basis, certain democracies anyways, right? Let's say in the United States, we switch leaders, let's say every 4 years or 8 years. And so nobody can take control for too long. Obviously, it's put up for election. And so there's this kind of mechanism to place to kind of have the checks and balances. Hopefully nothing goes out of whack. But it's not perfect. You can definitely pervert and subvert the process. We talked about all that in the democracy episode. So what was the answer? Well, there was a higher level above the democracy that helped put watchdogs in place that could pay attention to the signals, at least this is the way I would think of it, of whether or not something is going bad, right? There are hallmarks of kind of destructive practices that could happen within democracy. Just like at the level of democracy, it can pay attention to certain signals and do things to make sure that at its level, it seems to be going okay. And so you can kind of think of it as a kind of shifting up. Remember my shifting up episode, right? Shift up, kind of work at the upper level. Go one level up and pay attention to the signals instead of trying to analytically figure out and guarantee something's going to happen at any given one level. So for democracy to go well, you should have watchdogs in place. And maybe the watchdogs could be perverted to a certain extent as well. Well, there's no reason you couldn't have a level above that. Now, I'm not saying, turtles all the way up, so to speak. You got to stop somewhere. But the higher and higher you go, as long as you're only paying attention to signals, that will start to kind of dampen out in the sense of, I believe that will converge to a pretty good solution. As long as each level pays attention, kind of watches over the level below it, right? The mitochondria gets the right dosage because at the cell level, it's getting signals. And if those signals are out of whack, things can be kind of lowered or increased with its environment in order to give the mitochondria its right concentration. The organism is paying attention to signals, which will affect the cell. The group is paying attention to signals so that the individual can have what it needs, and so forth. And this is why you see the emergence of a lot of hierarchies in nature. I believe that is a major role that is happening, is that each level of the hierarchy is paying attention to a signal at its level that helps control what happens to the level below. Okay? So this signaling is always there. Now, this has to work in a way that you're only paying attention to the signal. So think of micromanagement. Think about the hierarchy that exists in an organization. If the level above micromanages the level below, this is problematic, this is toxic, this is going to lead to fragility in the system, because that's not the top level just paying attention to signal. This is the top level trying to intervene in the process, right? That kind of naive intervention where you dig in too deep, it causes all kinds of fragility in the system, because now you're not paying attention to signals, you're actually trying to control from above. You have to allow each level to have its autonomy, to have its flexibility, and only the level above pays attention to the signal. So in order for these kind of hierarchies to work, it has to only be the signals, the high-level signals that are paid attention to, and to use those to help make decisions. And I think that's a way that we can go through life to pay attention to dosage. I really think that's a more scientifically rigorous way than trying to analyze the crap out of something and pretend like we have access to information that we don't. So whatever it is in life, I said at the beginning, We got to, just to finish off here, right? We got to partake in our environments. We have to bring in inputs, bring in resources. There's no way around that. We're not completely self-sufficient. But in doing that, everything that we take in bears the seeds of its own destruction, right? Doesn't matter what it is, water, protein, right? MSG, salt, people, information, right? We see this at the individual level, the organizational level, and the nation level. There's always the seeds of destruction there. So really the big realization is that, dosage does make the poison. It's not good or it's bad. You got to somehow strike the right dosage. And I don't think the absolutist approach is really going to work, right? Remember the COVID example? You could shut things down right away at the beginning. Makes sense because you understand the properties of catastrophes, of how they take off in an exponential fashion, but you are going to have to figure out a dosage. Okay, you can try shutting out salt altogether. That doesn't make sense. And even things like arsenic and cyanide could actually be beneficial. Radiation, whatever it is, in really, really low dosages, in very low dosages. So you don't want to try to eliminate things altogether. It doesn't make sense to do that. We don't have that kind of information to know that that's a good thing to do. There's no such thing as anything being completely bad or completely good. It all comes down to trying to get what that dosage is. Okay, can't really do it analytically. Can't really use things like the knowledge of catastrophe to actually predict where that dosage is supposed to be. So if we look at nature, we look at the emergence of hierarchies, we realize what those different levels are doing to make sure that the level below has what it needs. It comes down to paying attention to signals. And I think you can do this in your life. You can do this as an individual. You can do this with your company, or the company or the organization can do this. And I think nations can do this by putting in place levels above each level that don't intervene, but only pay attention to well-known hallmarks or signals that would suggest things are going out of whack. Okay. You can imagine, we talked about monopolies with organizations that, there could be organizations that get too big, that get to, have too much influence. Maybe social media networks have, too many followers. Is kind of meta level information that you could use as signals to signify something's out of whack, something needs to change. And we have to make sure things don't go out of control. So I think it comes down to paying attention to signals. And I think if you accept that, instead of trying to analyze the crap out of everything, you'll realize that you can make better decisions in life. You can strike better dosages with people, how much you compromise, what you eat in terms of carbs, protein, whatever it is, how much exercise. You can do this with your organization. And I think nations can put things in place like watchdogs and even meta watchdogs on top of that pay attention to signals to strike the right dosage. Okay, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. As always, until next time, take care.